Today, if you ask a PlayStation aficionado, some kind of maybe a talking head or influencer or maybe a fan or maybe someone who has a platform, if they would wager with you if PlayStation would be bringing another game to Xbox or not, do you know that they're not going to be able to wager anything significant? Do you know why? Because they don't know. They're not aware as to what PlayStation is going to do. In fact, there's a report that is now being circulated because PlayStation's annual report that it put out removes the piece where they actually wrote that they were going to be chasing revenue from, other places outside of the console. And this is making what I think is a little bit of an interesting conversation to pretty much spurn. Now, this is written by Sammy Barker. However, there are others whom I've also seen, in a sense, continue to post this stuff out there. I saw a tweet, shout out to Brap of Brap Podcast, who basically put this out here and said this. I think it was Brap's statement that made me go, okay, let me make this video. Let me point out a few things. Let's see if we can actually apply this indicator across the board. So Brap says Sony/PlayStation's latest corporate report tells a very different story from what influencers and pundits have been pushing. Now, what has influencers and pundits been pushing? And what is PlayStation's so-called new strategic marker that they're pointing to? Apparently, Sammy Barker writes about it, and for some strange reason, PlayStation has removed the statement that said leveraging technology, shared resources to innovate development processes and optimize timelines while ensuring quality, and then evolving IP and franchises to inspire and engage players on new fronts. Apparently, this is the piece that they've removed. So Brap is saying that pundits have been pushing this story that PlayStation is taking according to him, platform agnostic, paradigm of some sort. Which he says their financials clearly contradict that narrative that PlayStation is going platform agnostic like Xbox. I think there are a lot of conflations here, number one, because PlayStation doesn't even have that many games that they're launching at this point, number one. Number two, PlayStation has launched almost all of its PlayStation 5 titles that were so-called exclusive to Steam. So if they remove such a strategic marker, could it not also be interpreted that they just don't have that many games to put out there for it to be significant in this particular cycle, but they're still going to pursue it nonetheless? Or are we going to now use a different metric than the one that was used for Xbox? Brap, the last time you had a podcast that you invited me, I couldn't make it, but I was listening to the podcast. You said something about how Xbox was, in a sense, planning to make money. And I said sell software. And you know what you said? You said, well, they also intend to not only sell you software, but sell you Game Pass. Do y'all remember when Xbox actually removed Game Pass reaching a specific metric as something that was tied to Satya Nadella's, bonuses? Right? Wasn't that a strategic point of his own advancement? Did that mean that Xbox Game Pass was going to now, in some sense, take some kind of a back burner level of, urgency? Or is that just still part of their business, but they're no longer basically using it as some kind of a metric that they want to call significant? It could be that interpretation. And this is exactly what I'm saying. Now, even when we sit here and interpret all day, we could just easily resolve this by looking at what has been said by Lynn Azar, the Senior Vice President for Finance and Corporate Development for Sony Interactive Entertainment. We could also go ahead and inform ourselves a little bit more by just looking very carefully at this particular financial report that was put out here. And as you're looking at the specific one-liner that was removed, actually one small caption, there's also a very important place that intersects with this particular fireside chat from the financial perspective. I'll show you guys here because we have a number, and I want to invite all of the PlayStation aficionados, talking heads, even press, and those that are pro PlayStation to see if they can actually come out here and explain to us how PlayStation is going to achieve a specific metric that is actually, in a sense, subheaded under PlayStation CFO Lin Tao. I'll finish reading your statement, Brap, because I want to get a sense of what you're saying here. And I want to go over to Sammy Barker's statement. Then I'll probably highlight a little bit of what Nib has been saying, because Nib continues to point out this so-called 2% that was made from revenue on PC as something that's not so significant, when in reality there's actually mathematical ramifications for that that none of you want to actually point to, but you keep saying other people are spreading a narrative. When we look at what the PlayStation executives say, I'll show you what that official narrative is, and maybe y'all can explain how that ties into this interpretation that you all are getting. You said, if anything, it reinforces why it's important to listen to subject matter experts and not engagement merchants. Okay, let's tone it down with the name calling. Or I guess I would say the snide remarks. I don't know what, maybe it's not. Maybe they are engagement merchants. But what if I told you that a premise, for instance, because I'm somebody who's made some kind of a version of PlayStation's multi-platform strategy is important to them. And the reason I made that particular claim is because their CFO here, SVP for Finance and Corporate Development, actually made that claim, as well as Sony CFO pointing to one of their major metrics right now being monthly active users. Let's listen first to what Lynn Azar says. Then we're going to juxtapose it with what Lintao also is putting out here. By the way, look at the numbers on the screen, 10%, 10%. We'll talk about that here pretty soon. Actually, before we get to her statements, let's read what Sami Barka writes on. He writes, much has been made of PlayStation and its dalliance with multi-platform releases. In a world where Microsoft has started releasing its entire portfolio to PS5, that's not accurate. You're a writer. You should strive for accuracy, I guess. Many suspect Sony to be following the same path, especially after unexpectedly porting games like Helldivers 2 to Xbox Series X and S and LEGO Horizon Adventures to the Nintendo Switch. I have to say, Sammy, unexpectedly would mean somebody tripped and fell and their face hit the keyboard and submitted 2 builds of 2 different games to 2 different publishers. It's not unexpected, it's quite intentional, and I will prove it to you. But interestingly, in its latest corporate report, which is this corporate report over here, the firm has removed the game revenue beyond console from its list of strategically emphasized indicators. Now, the way this stuff is being pushed is interesting because Sammy later tells you that you can expect it to continue to belatedly port its titles to PC and explore other consoles where appropriate. You can stop the video here when I'm done with this. But it's clear from this report that its focus is on its own platform for the foreseeable future. This is what's called arguing with a phantom. No serious person has made the comment or tried to make the argument or insinuate that PlayStation was not going to focus on its platform. I don't know who's made that connotation. I don't know who's made that equivalence. But if they have, they've not been listening to what's being said. However, when anybody tries to have this conversation, it seems like the PlayStation aficionados try to pull that argument from thin air and pretend like we did not hear Herman Hulst say this.
And then finally, we'll continue to grow our franchises through a very thoughtful release cadence and as transmedia properties.
Interesting. Thoughtful release cadence and as transmedia properties. They also pretend like Lynn Azar did not say this in front of investors. Listen.
You expect to increase operating income amount and margin percentage in fiscal year 2025 compared with fiscal year 2024. But can you further grow them in fiscal 2026? And if so, how do you intend to do so?
Did you hear that? The goals are for FY 2026. The corporate report also highlights something very interesting. Under Lintao, who is the CFO of Sony, they talk about how they want to maximize synergies and create a CAGR of operating income, which will be 10% or more as their target from fiscal year 2023 to 2026. Their actual results so far from fiscal year 23 to 24 is 23%. And this is on the basis of Sony excluding the financial services segment. Please follow me. Then they talked about continuing operations for a 3-year cumulative operating income margin of 10% or more. And their fiscal year goals were 10.6%. Let's look and see if that number resonated with what they said in July. Come on, let's go.
So, starting by, the PlayStation business is in a very good position and has a very strong momentum. We expect to continue this momentum and remain optimistic about fiscal year 26 and beyond. So in particular, as we approach the second half of the MRP period, we expect an even higher level of our revenue to be from content and services, which will improve the overall profitability of the business. Our roadmap of first-party titles and the high expectations we have for the third-party titles will directly drive the business' natural operating leverage. Additionally, as we are focused on growing the PS Plus business profitably, continuing to drive subscriber growth in our premium and extra tiers. And finally, we expect the ongoing focus on operational excellence to translate into a positive impact on profitability. So overall, we remain committed to contributing meaningfully to Sony Group's MRP target of operating profit CAGR of 10% or more and cumulative operating profit margin of 10% or more.
Did you hear it? Did you hear it? Did you hear the CAGR of operating income and cumulative operating income margin? Did you hear her say that? PlayStation is unified in their goal to do this. Now the question is how they intend to do this. And that's also mentioned here in the very next question that Linnaeus are at to answer. Again, Sammy Barker writes over here, right, that interestingly, they removed this game revenue beyond console from the list of its indicators, while this featured prominently in 2024's version of the same document. The platform holder now cites as key measures hardware units sold globally, monthly active users, total gameplay hours. This aligns with the comments the company has made in the past, where it talked about greater focus on engagement, but it clearly understands that hardware sales are its primary path to monthly active users. Interesting, because when Lin Tao said monthly active users was the main focus, she also iterated that hardware sales were the previous primary focus, unless they've switcherooed it back and forth from the last time that she said it till now. But I'll just go ahead and say, let's just leave that one. It says there's no real reference in the document to explain why why Sony has removed the game revenue beyond console as a strategically emphasized indicator. But it's absolutely worth noting that fiscal year 2024 multi-platform releases accounted for just 2% of PlayStation's overall revenue. The one thing I haven't heard Sammy Barker nor all others like Nib95 talk about is what significant software cadence did PlayStation put forward from their own first-party titles that would have actually given them such a crazy, result. Their game release cadence has not been as impactful as would, in a sense, make for anything. Even their old game library that has been going to Steam has pretty much all gone at this point. There really is nothing to bring to Steam in this generation to make any impact. Or do these people really think bringing games that are like 6 years old or 7 years old, somewhere somehow are going to, in a sense, move the needle at this point? That's not how it works. Y'all know that game sales are actually very much dependent on hype. So on the very first day that your game is coming out, you better make sure that you're reaching as much as the potential buying audience that you can reach. If anything, this is telling us that their so-called hold it down strategy to stay on the console is not where it's at. If anything, because when they launch their games, whether the big games, whether the small games, they're getting hammered everywhere by the third-party games and such. But let's leave that and let's go back to what this lady says. And I'll show you how it's almost, in a sense, contradictory to the way this framing is going.
How do you expect the financial profile of your business to evolve over the long term?
So again, the business fundamentals are strong, and we expect this to continue across many key areas. First, strong sales growth driven by highly engaged and multi-generation MAU. And then an increase in the PS Plus, we spoke about that, increase in PS Plus revenue due to the shift to the higher tier and also our price revision. And then on the first-party live services, becoming more consistent, predictable, and growing revenue stream. And also with the continued strength and reliable delivery of our tentpole titles, incremental revenue also generated by going off console with our first-party IP.
Did you hear it? So, it's either these folk are saying that somewhere, somehow, that focus is no longer there, or they just don't and I could interpret it, just don't have as many games that are going to be impactful enough, Or they realize that we're now onto that strategy and are modifying it so that it doesn't seem like they're not putting the focus, which they always have primarily put on their consoles. You know, they're not doing the same thing that they've done before. What's crazy is when Brad put this particular tweet out here, I think it was Brad or Sammy Barker, somebody put a tweet out here, and I saw that JTech threw some math out there, and I thought, really, if everybody wants to come out here and run the math and do the numbers and such, it'd be very interesting if we actually allow for ourselves, you know, to be very frank as to how this 10% is going to be achieved. There it is. JTech said, calculation. PC revenue excluding Helldivers 2. I don't know why y'all are excluding Helldivers 2 from PC revenue. Y'all like to play this live service versus single player revenue as if the money is not green on all sides. But that's just that's fantasy. He says $548 million. Total gaming revenue, $27 billion. Percentage, $548 million divided by $27 billion. Times 100, 2.3%. Then, final answer. This looks like, you know, an AI model. PlayStation's PC port revenue in 2025, excluding Helldivers 2, is approximately 2% of its total gaming revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, if the 2% is so small, then why are they pursuing it? And why is Lee Nazar talking about it as their goal in 2026 and beyond? Because they understand that 2% is kind of like the pathway to getting to 10, 15%. They understand that they've already pretty much maxed out the PlayStation user base in terms of who's going to buy their first party games. Now they can sit here and depend on the third party titles. Yes, but they also realize that depending on the third party titles is absolutely not the way to go at this point in time, right? Else they have to maybe shut down studios, or they'll deliver, as Herman Holst said, at least one tentpole title for you. So those of you that are championing this, you have to understand. You really have to understand the ramifications of what it is that you're championing, that you're going to champion this and you're not going to get first-party games at a high cadence. Remember when Shuhei Yoshida said that porting to PC was like printing money? And he said that that particular, strategy was designed to infuse more money into first-party development. And if you're not getting money infused into first-party development, your cadence is low. So you're in a rock and a hard place. You're not in between. You're inside it. You will either get less first-party games because of your desire that other people don't play the games that you're playing, or they play them, which we will, because it's going to make money, so they're going to put it on PC. And you maybe get first-party games. That's how it's going to go. And if profitability is no longer there, and as the, situation changes more and more, they'll move to Xbox. And for those who keep thinking that the single-player games are the more important games, you're lying to yourselves. They've already moved the majority of their investment into the live service games. This thing is not complex, but it's as if every time it has to look like it's more complex than it is. Subject matter experts, like what? Just listen to what the execs are saying. It's not that crazy that they want to make money. You made 2%. Look at it. Can you imagine somebody making 2% of $27 billion look very small? Come on. It's because y'all act like PlayStation doesn't need money when none of you would ever refuse 2% of $27 billion. None of you would ever. No one that I know would refuse it. And if you really want to go into the math, go calculate how much it's going to take PlayStation to get that 10% CAGR that they're looking for. And for Sony to actually get there with their current revenue. See if exploring other measures and other avenues is not the way for them to go. Go check it out yourselves. I'm glad that y'all are whipping out the calculators and the chat GPTs, because what it's going to show you, you're really not going to like. Again, that's why Destin is over here having a field day on Twitter and has now become basically the cynical warrior, because he constantly goes around saying some of the craziest things that for some strange reason, it seems like it's baiting y'all, but it's actually very funny because he'll say it. Look where he posts this Hunter's repost of this particular conversation. Yo, PlayStation fans, come on, act a little bit grown up here. Sony removes multi-platform revenue from its corporate strategic indicators. What? And Destin basically is mocking this, saying obviously this means PlayStation is going to pull all releases from non-PS5 console platforms, make a PS5 Pro and abandon the strategy they went into great detail about 3 months ago. Again, y'all, you're playing into the hands of everybody that's already started to look at the PlayStation, conversational community as kind of unserious. You're playing into their hands rather than actually looking and saying, okay, perhaps they've probably looked at this particular proposition. It's not something that they see is going to make a really big dent at the forefront, so they've removed it. Simple interpretation. Why? How do we know? They're not bouncing credit cards to buy PlayStation games on Steam. Did you hear what I said? And they still have games that are slated to go to PlayStation, to go to Xbox and Steam. Is Marathon not going to Xbox? So what are y'all talking about? Oh, it's live service. Well, it needs players. Of course. Do you really think because it's live service, it gives it any difference in any sense? It's only in your eyes where they're basically dangling some carrot on a stick. Once you wash your eyes off the mirage, you will wake up to this corporate playing that they're doing. Gamers, sometimes, man, this is why gaming companies are rich. I think they're rich 80% or 90% of the gullibility of the gamer. And then the remaining 10% is basically them just putting in effort. That's what I've always thought anyways. And I think I'm starting to see some indication of it. Maybe not in this case, but man, it's so wild. Thanks for watching. Peace out.